There is something they call a keynote speaker, and that is the main speaker of a conference. And whether he has been addressed as a keynote speaker or not, the next speaker would anyway be the one who would draw most attention. I first met him, I think, a year ago in 13 days or something like that, when I went to Catalonia to watch and observe how the election process went forward with the referendum on the right to vote for self-determination. And we all know how things went on that 1st of October, and we also know what has happened ever since that. You can see here on a poster over here that there are 9 of the leaders of the Catalan independence movement are in jail in Spain, and they have not been in the court yet and tried their case. Some of them are facing threats of being jailed for 30 years. And on the other picture, on the lower part of it, is a picture of 7 of the Catalan leaders who are actually today living in exile. One of them being Carles Puigdemont, who's going to address you now, and I think that we will offer you the floor, and maybe you will start by presenting yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And may I just say that in Catalonia they still call him President Carles Puigdemont.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Magni. First of all, let me say a big thank you to all of you for your invitation to be present here, for your questions, I suppose. Dear Kenneth, I succeed to bring the weather that I come from, because I come from Belgium now. So that seems quite a Belgian weather, not, of course, a Catalan weather. But I will try to explain what's exactly the situation now today in Catalonia. But let me say, before that, to have explanation about what was gone 1 year ago. The self-determination referendum on the 1st of October 2017 and the subsequent political declaration of independence voted by the Parliament of Catalonia on the 27th of the same month were the culmination of the first phase of the so-called Catalan process. Catalonia decided to become an independent state. But the democratic implementation of the new republic was prevented by the force and physical violence of the Spanish state. You can see a lot of videos explaining, showing the kind of violence the Spanish state has used against peaceful citizens. After more than 7 years, the pro-independence movement in Catalonia has been demonstrating massively, in a peaceful way, all over the streets of our nation, and has filled now and again the ballot boxes with votes for the full sovereignty of Catalonia. Every year, our National Day, in the 11th of September, has shown millions of people mobilized in favor of independence, breaking the news all over the world with its remarkably peaceful character. With people of all age, these mobilizations have been the biggest in Europe since the fall of communism and Berlin's Wall. Thus, there is a high-stakes political conflict between Catalonia and the Spanish state. A conflict that the Catalan society wants to solve respecting 2 principles. First, there must be political dialogue over how can Catalonia exercise this sovereignty. And secondly, the decision must be agreed by the Catalan people through a referendum. In most democratic countries, this kind of situation will have led to a political agreement. But that's not the case in Spain. Instead of public recognition, today the leaders who organized those demonstrations with no incidents have been imprisoned, accused of sedition, a charge for which you can receive from 15 to 30 years of prison. Jordi Sánchez and Jordi Cuixart are in preventive jail without having been condemned, treated like terrorists in violation of their fundamental rights to freedom. Next week, we will celebrate 1 year in preventive jail. 1 year. I am myself today, together with all my government colleagues that helped me to organize the 1st of October referendum, accused of rebellion and risking 30 years of prison. 6 of them are still in preventive prison, as well as the president of Catalan Parliament, Carme Forcadell, and the 7 of us continue to be in exile in Scotland, in Switzerland, or in Belgium, as myself. Meanwhile, freedom of expression, freedom of information, and freedom of assembly have been curtailed, and the authoritarian drive of Spain has been recognized as a European concern. Despite of all of that, I insist that the only way to solve peacefully this conflict is dialogue. To start a negotiation with no red lines and in a climate of respect for both sides. I would like to see Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, Spanish Prime Minister, doing the same thing. It is sad to see how he rejects once and again to talk about the right of self-determination of Catalonia. I don't know if he realizes that he will not be able to defend for much longer the old order in Spain. The Catalan people cannot be tied to a state against their own will in the 21st century. It is sad to see also that the Spanish Prime Minister has not taken steps to finish with repression. His general prosecutor, nominated by the Spanish government, still has the chance to Europeanize the standards of Spanish justice and understand that organizing a referendum cannot and should not be labeled as a rebellion or a crime of sedition. Treating a vote as an act of war seems to me the kind of things that a dictatorship will do, not a consolidated Western democracy. Prime Minister Sánchez should be aware that while there is instability and repression in Catalonia, it will be very difficult for Spain to remain politically stable. There are many reforms to do to be ready for the next economic crisis, for example, and political capital is limited. It is my advice to Prime Minister Sánchez to talk with Catalan government about a political solution and about self-determination as soon as possible. Moreover, it must be understood that political persecution has caused a real trauma in Catalan society. Perhaps you will think that in the world higher levels of violence are not to be seen in the other states. And you are absolutely right from that point of view. However, from a relative point of view, the state's anger against Catalan citizens has been extremely high. We are a modern, technological society, open to the world, that could never have suspected that this level of violence will be exerted, living in an Europe whose foundational values are freedom and democracy. Can you imagine that this will have taken place in Scotland, or in Quebec, or in the Faroe Islands? The Spanish state must leave aside anger and rage, as many Catalans want their own state, and the unity of Spain cannot be a religious principle. It's not a matter of faith, it's a matter of democracy. We want to sit down to negotiate a referendum on self-determination that is binding and internationally recognized. I have always said that it is worthwhile to do it again. If this time the other party, the one with the power of the force, Spain, accepts to participate in it and to recognize it. But otherwise, we will feel committed to the mandate of the October referendum to implement the Catalan Republic without delay. We only want what has already been done repeatedly in other cases like Scotland and Quebec. Also on November 4th, France, as my colleague has explained before, in New Caledonia, organized a referendum, France organized a referendum self-determination in New Caledonia, although for many French people that territory is an integral part of France. As a Catalan, I would like to be in another situation. Here, in the Faroe Islands, you are on the right direction. The right direction to reach a deal with Denmark for a new constitution that will respect, hopefully, your right to self-determination. Scotland made a deal with London to have an independent referendum, for independence referendum. And who knows if soon we will have a second one. And even Jacobin and centralist France has negotiated an independence referendum with New Caledonia. But at the same time, I'm happy and proud. Europe, not European institutions, but European society, is moving, step by step, little by little, but surely. Today, we, the small nations of Europe, are the forces of positive change in Europe. In the midst of a wave of authoritarian politics, we defend our right to self-determination, our right to democracy, our right to give our people a say over its own future. We shall continue, because with our efforts, we are building a better and a stronger Europe and a fairer world. In order to succeed, a globalized world needs to be based on a true sense of diversity, able to respect its minorities, to give them political power to decide their own future, to be able to define their own strategies for the future, to find their own concrete solutions for the global problems that we all need to confront. When I look into Scotland, or into New Caledonia, or into the New Faroe Islands, I don't see a problem, but a receipt for our common future, for a world common future. However, it's not only us who can make change possible. We need partners. Therefore, it is fundamental that Denmark, France, and the United Kingdom have understood that by allowing our peoples to vote, they are deepening the strength of their democracy. There is no stronger border than the one that has been ratified in the ballot boxes. Spain needs to set aside its obsession with sacred unity and leave Catalonia become an independent and friendly neighboring state. Of course, we have some difficulties today in Catalonia. And maintaining political unity is not the least of them. Repression has effects and makes the worst fears from all of us to arise. This is what we need to fight against. We need to remember that our adversary are those that use violence against ballot boxes, those that put in prison our colleagues and friends, those that legitimize the repression instead of denouncing it. Our adversary can never be those that defend self-determination or independence in a different way from ourselves, or those that want to vote against independence, because it's his right. In our internal diversity, we need to find our strength, not our weakest point. I have friends in prison. I have friends in exile. Party and government colleagues, I wish they were not there, and I wish they will be immediately released. I wish they could return home tomorrow. I understand their sacrifice, and I'm grateful to them. Catalonia is the only country I know in the European Union where so many politicians are ready to pay the price for their ideas and convictions. We need to be proud about it, and to keep up our peaceful right for independence and self-determination. The current structure of the Spanish state, 40 years after the approval of the Spanish Constitution, after the Franco's death, 40 years ago, the structure of the Spanish state is not able to manage the challenges we are in the frame of the fourth industrial revolution. It doesn't matter if the Prime Minister is Pedro Sánchez from the Socialist Party or Mariano Rajoy from the Popular Party. It doesn't matter. The problem lies much deeper than that. The day that this is understood outside and inside Spain, it will be easier to work towards a permanent solution. Be ready, because my colleagues in prison risk to be condemned to many years in prison for crimes that were never committed. And the Catalan people will not accept it. I expect, and I wish, that there will be a massive non-violent mobilization in defense of our rights and in support of our colleagues in jail. Many people still skeptic with independence are Democrats that cannot accept that innocent people remain so long in prison or exile. I believe in them as I believe in the more than 2 million of pro-independent citizens that have resisted the pressure to give up. There will be ups and there will be downs, but it is in the democratic dignity of our people that will find the seed for a better future. Always peaceful, always non-violent, but with a clear goal in our minds and hearts, self-determination, and if this is the will of the people, establishing the new Catalan Republic. Thank you very much, Magni. Thank you very much for all of you and for your questions too. And thank you very much for your attention.
I would like to, well, we now have a possibility to ask questions to Puigdemont, and I will start with one question here. Once you got some water. and that is about the people who are jailed in Spain. With this new government of Sanchez, what are the outlook for that you will have a more civilized behavior from the state versus these people? I mean, when will there be a fair trial, and what will the charges be, and what is your expectations?
Well, we decide to go to exile in order to defend our rights to have a fair trial, because that is not possible in Spain. For many reasons. First of all, because there is no separation, a clear separation of powers in Spain. The General Council of the judiciary power, the members of the Supreme Court, and the members of the Audiencia Nacional are nominated by the political majority. And the political majority always, since the first democratic elections, was in the hands of the Populist Party or in the Socialist Party, who are clearly against our right to self-determination. So, there is no guarantees. There's a lot of mistakes in that procedure. We will denounce that in the European Court of Human Rights. And I'm afraid when the trial starts, I suggest to you to follow the trial, because you will discover how Spain managed the right to have a fair trial. The policy, when we decide to support the new Prime Minister, because he has elected with our votes in the Spanish Parliament, for example, we expected the Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez will explain a new receipt for our crisis. We don't expect to see a kind of 2.0 version of the Rajoy's receipt, because it doesn't work. But after several months in power, Pedro Sánchez has shown its incapacity to explain if he has or not a project for Catalonia. And the time has finished. And probably the next week we will see how Pedro Sánchez loses its parliamentary support, because it's time to have an answer. Are you, Mr. Sánchez, in the same path as Mr. Rajoy, or are you trying to start a new deal with Catalonia in order to recognize that is a real problem? Trying to solve political problem through the general prosecutor, through prisons, to the penal court, is to do a very huge mistake, because it's a political and constitutional matter. It's not a crime to call for a referendum. It's not a crime to ask people its opinion, its will, their will for its future. So if the general prosecutor insists to accuse my colleagues and myself as rebels, so that means that the violent people who use guns and weapons in order a political change, that is the worst way to solve that political crisis. I'm afraid that could increase the tensions between Catalonia and Spain.
Following up on that question, there was a discussion when this happened that Rajoy was a kind of covering up for his own internal political problems, and the Catalans were a sort of a minority in the Spanish kingdom, and he had an advantage with gathering more votes behind him by being very harsh towards the Catalonian. Is it the same with Sánchez?
We'll see, because Sánchez is a minority, a clear minority, and we don't know when we will call for elections. Normally, the general elections, the legislative elections in Spain, will be held in 2020, but I can't remember exactly the month. We'll see. But that is a fact. We are a minority. Catalans are only 16% of the Spanish population. That is one problem, because we have no any kind of possibility to exercise a political pressure in order to promote a constitutional change. It's impossible. When, for example, several years ago, we approved in the Catalan parliament with a huge majority, including non-pro-independence party, a proposition to the Spanish parliament to allow Catalan government to call for a non-binding consultation, which is in the frame of the Spanish constitution. The majority of Spanish parties voted against that. So there is no one single possibility in the frame of the Spanish constitution to call for a non-binding consultation to the Catalan people about its future. Why? Because, yes, you are right. That kind of attitude against Catalonia has a result, has electoral results. But it's time to change that strategy, that narrative. It's not possible to have a political stability in Spain without Catalonia, without a dialogue in Catalonia. And that is clear if you look the last years. And probably after the elections, we will see the same. Because despite we are a minority, we want to do politics and we want to continue fighting for our rights. And that has effects in the reality of Spain, despite the opinion of the main parties. Yes, we are the minority, but we are the most powerful economical region in Spain. We represent more than 25.5% the Spanish exports, and we receive a third of the direct foreign investments in Spain. So we are a very powerful reality. So it's intelligent to have a good relationship with such a powerful region, not threaten, not put its leaders in jail, not follow the... There are actually 700 mayors in Catalonia, prosecuted only for its approval, because they have approved in their community a resolution supporting the 1st of October referendum. And now it's a crime. Yesterday, the Catalan parliament approved a resolution presented by the left party, which are not for independence, the left party called Catalunya en Comú, and we approved a resolution against monarchy. And yesterday, in the afternoon, on the evening, Spanish Prime Minister said that is not acceptable, and we will present a demand in the justice against that approval. A political approval, saying we want to live in a republic. Where is a crime in that approval?
In this process that you've been through now, both with the political prisoners, but also through your referendum, we had the feeling that you were resting much upon the tradition of democracies in Western Europe, and that the European Union would come to some sort of an assistance to respect the democratic rights and the human rights. But you must have been some sort of unhappy about the response that you received so far. Can you rest upon that support in the future?
Well, I must be precise. I'm disappointed by the European Union institutions' attitude, not concerning our fighting for independence, because, of course, we expect no one single support from the states at the beginning. It was in the European tradition to say we are in the side of the Spanish state, or etc. Not about that. I was very disappointed because regarding, I don't know if you can show the videos, what you see in the beginning of the presentation, in face of such violation of fundamental rights, when police from a state member use violence against peaceful citizens, seeing that attitude, they has decided to remain silent. And then that not concerns Catalans, that concerns European citizens as a whole. Because when freedom or fundamental rights, human rights, European values are threatened in a part of the Union, that concerns the whole Union. Look the case of Poland, Hungary, Italy. I am, as a European citizen, I'm worried about the lack of commitment to fundamental rights in the rest of Europe. Because if we accept there is, for example, in Poland, no separation of powers, that affects, of course, the Spanish attitude regarding the justice. So this silence is not acceptable, because we are European citizens, and we show the best face of Europe protecting ballot boxes, peaceful people from the old age go to votation despite all the threats, despite the violence. They go to the polling stations, and that is the best face of Europe, and the other was the worst face of Europe. So we don't expect support for our struggle for independence. We expected at that moment a support as European citizens who were hidden by a police from one member of the European Union. That is my disappointment.
Barry? Yeah, Barry Jason.
Thank you. I just want to ask you, how do you get out of this deadlock? I mean, in your lecture, you talked about you want a dialogue with the Spanish authorities, and there are no red lines, you say, but at the same time you also refer a lot to your goal of gaining independence and establishing a republic. So I mean, what can one expect in a future dialogue? Could one expect maybe that you settle with a revised autonomy statute, for example, in line with the proposal that was overturned by the Constitutional Court in 2010, for example? Could one expect things like that, or are you very firm on independence? That's my question.
Well, in a dialogue, in the negotiation, we must have the right to expose your project. So our project is a republic, is an independent republic. Is that the only project possible for Catalonia? Of course not. We try, for example, since 1978, after the approval of the Spanish Constitution, we try to find our role in the frame of the Spanish state. So we showed there was different ways, despite the independent way, to have a good relationship in Spain. But it's our project now to have a republic. So we expect to start a dialogue with the Spanish state, knowing what is exactly its project, because there is no one other project on the table. So it's time to know if Spain has a Spanish project for Catalonia. The time is finished. So Mr. Sanchez, or Spanish Parliament, or Spanish political system, are you some idea how to solve, in addition of the violence and repression, the political problem, or not? Because if not, we will continue for implementation of the Republic. So that means not red lines. We accept that the Spanish government goes to negotiation saying, I want to propose to you a new statute of autonomy. It's right. But we'll see that exactly means, because, as you remember, after the approval of the Spanish Constitution was in the beginning very open to the change. Because they say in the Article 2, the Spain is formed by regions and a new word called nationalities, a kind of synonym of nations. You are not exactly a nation, but of course you are not a region. So in that new concept, I think the legislators at that time has imagined the next generations could decline what that means in a more open point of view that they have in that moment, because we must not forget, at that moment, the army was watching all the democratic process, and the army was very, very close to the Franco era. So, but the problem was in the sentence in 2010, the Spanish Constitutional Court has broken that agreement, has put a line, an end, the levels and the limits, the potential of the Spanish Constitution. And that is the problem, because any kind of proposal from the Spanish government must be inside that limit. And it's a very low limit for us. So I remember a scholar, a catedrátic on constitutional law from the Sevilla University, so he's not pro-independent of Catalonia, he's not Catalan, who at that time has written an article in the El País newspaper calling that sentence as a coup d'etat, because that has finished the constitutional agreement in 1978.
Bjørn Konrad, Joshua.
Takk for det, Magne. If one looks at the events immediately prior to the elections on 1st October 2017, it appears obvious that the authorities in Madrid were not in agreement on the legality of the holding and the preparation of this referendum, this plebiscite on independence of Catalan. If we look at this from an international legal point of view, I would think that the most scholars and the international case law supports the understanding that there are only two situations in which a people has right to exercise external self-determination. One is the case of non-self-governing territories, which we have spoken about, others have spoken about earlier today. And the second case is the so-called remedial self-determination, in which there is a military occupation, or where blatantly the expression of the internal self-determination is prevented by the central authorities. Now, given the position of Madrid, I wonder, it would be very enlightening to hear the position of yourself. How did you perceive this question prior to the organization of the elections? Were you of the view that you were entitled to exercise an external self-determination, or was this the fulfillment of an internal self-determination, which, though, may result in independence?
Well, you must know that in the Article 96 of the Spanish Constitution, they say clearly all the international treaties and covenants signed or ratified, by the Kingdom of Spain will be part of the internal order of Spain. In 1977, the Kingdom of Spain has ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which Article 1 you have shown before. All peoples are right to self-determination. And Article 10 of the Spanish Constitution say, in case when rights recognized in that Constitution are in collision, will prevail the interpretation from the international point of view. So if you look at the current Spanish Constitution, the right of self-determination is recognized, but is not respected. That is important for us. Secondly, after the Kosovo resolution, it's clear there is no one single point in the international law against the unilateral declaration of independence. That is clear. And finally, when we are a minority, with no political capacity to change things, we have tried all things. First, a new statute of autonomy, approved by the Catalan parliament with a huge majority. From 135 members, 120 voted yes. So it is clear and a huge majority. We approved a new text. More than 2/3 of the Spanish parliament approved it. And finally, we approved by a referendum. We tried that. We failed because the Constitutional Court suspended. Then we demand a fiscal agreement, a new deal concerning our fiscal relationship with Spain in the line, exactly in the way that Basque Country has. We failed. We received another no. After that, we demand to call for a non-binding consultation, and we received a no. After that, we proposed twice, myself in front of Spanish Prime Minister, to collaborate to organize a referendum, like in the case of the United Kingdom. I was disposed to discuss about the date, when, the question, it's only independence yes or not, or you can also propose a new deal, a new statute of autonomy, what kind of majority we need in order to apply the results, and finally, if we are agreed to solve for a generation, despite the results, and we received a no. So, what alternative we have? Only a remedial secession, finally. Because is the right of self-determination, for me, is a tool of peace, and is something contradictory to see how the world only respects that right after a war. And the people who have killed themselves with a violent conflict, well, they are a price to recognize its right of self-determination. That is a huge mistake. Because what about the people like Nova Caledonia, or Scotland, or Quebec, or Flanders, or Fyri, who try to exercise the right of self-determination only with non-violent means, non-violent means? So we must be fighting about how improve and modernize the right of self-determination.
I think the next question comes from here, Jakob.
I have a question about what's the philosophy of these Spanish authorities? Is the Spanish constitution says that Spain is indivisible, but is the constitution supposed to be eternal? Is it unchanging forever? Is there no possibility of doing anything to change it sometimes in the future? And if you actually want to talk about changing the Spanish constitution, will you be thrown in jail? Will you be beaten? Will you never see the light of day again?
So for that reason, I mean the remedial secession. Because, well, you are right, the Article 2 of the Spanish Constitution, the first half say Spain is a unity and divisible nation, but continues saying Spain is formed by regional nationalities too. And if we look the literature of the right of self-determination, they always are talking about people. We, Catalonia, as recognized as a people in our Statute of Autonomy. If you look at the Spanish Constitution, they talk about the peoples of Spain. We are people. So we are a political subject. And we are right to exercise our right of self-determination. In case of contradiction, I think the right of self-determination is the tool to solve such contradiction. Because it's not against the right to unity recognized too by the Charter of United Nations. The integrity, the territorial integrity, because that right is it's only in case of attack or invasion from one country against another country, not concerns in case of the internal self-determination. Look the case of Germany. Germany has exercised a kind of self-determination right when he unified. And by the way, that has not created one single problem for European Union. There was not problem to join European Union in case of the internal enlargement. Is the Spanish Constitution the problem? No. Really no. There are several experts, not for independence of Catalonia, who are saying that the Catalans want to know, that means if there is or not a clear majority for independence, that is perfect in the frame of the Spanish Constitution. The problem is the political will, and we will never have the possibility to change that political will, because the idea of unity of Spain is above democracy. It concerns a mystical idea. You can discuss a lot of subjects with the Spanish politicians, but once you start to discussing about the unity of Spain, there is a absolutely problem. They are not able to discuss normally about that because it seems an idea that comes from God. And that is about democracy, human rights. It's incredible, but the problem is that the idea of unity of Spain is something sacred. And we are fighting about that, because also the idea of Catalonia is absolutely not sacred. We can discuss about all the states. So the problem is that it's a cultural problem. When I don't know if it was my last conference in Madrid with the questions open to the public, one person asked me, well, why not vote whole Spain for independence of Catalonia? Yes, okay, why? Are you proposing that Catalonia has the right to be independent, and the only difference between you and me is if is a matter of vote for the whole of Spain or only Catalan people? And they well, no, exactly for independence. Oh wait, when I find people who say you are not enough, okay, what's enough for you? It's the case of Montenegro, for example, 55. Okay, no, it's not exactly the majority who will vote, the demos. Is the right in itself. Because finally we discover you, Catalan, you have not the right to decide your own future. And that's the problem. Because if not, we will find a solution, sure.
Rekvi Olason, a journalist from the Faroese Radio.
You partly just answered my question. You said it was a cultural issue, but I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. Why is Spain different from, I don't know, Britain or Denmark or France, for that sake, or Germany, as you mentioned yourself? Could you? This is probably a long story, maybe, but you could.
It's a very long story. Yeah.
Shorten it a little bit. What are the cultural or historical contexts that make Spain react in a violent way? And question number two: did you, before you started this process, did you expect Spain, the Spanish state, to react in that way? So were you conscious of the fact that this might actually be the result, that you would have a violent reaction and you would end up in exile yourself? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Well, I'm not an expert in history, but I will try to answer shortly your first question. In fact, the big change in the Iberian or Spanish monarchy was in the beginning of the 18th century, when after the war of succession entered the Bourbon dynasty from France. Till that time, the kings come from the Austro-Hungarian dynasty, more confederate. And by the way, the name of the king, the first king, was Felipe II, Felipe V, and now we are under the Felipe VI. So Felipe V has approved a new plant decree and banned the Catalan language, the Catalan institution, Catalan constitution, and start a very centralized, like in the French model, administration that still are in service, in fact. So what is one of the problems? The construction of the centralized monarchy and the centralized state. And we, Catalonia, we defend the other candidate to the crown, and we lose, and we receive the consequences of our defeat. So we must wait till 1931 in the Second Spanish Republic to restore our parliament, our government, our right to self-government. And for a short time, because as you know, in 1939, starts the Franco's dictatorship, who has again banned Catalan language, Catalan institutions, etc., and executed my predecessor, the former Catalan president, who also was in exile in France, was extradited by the Germans at that time to the Spanish regime and was executed in 1940 in Barcelona. So I think it was, as you know, a big empire. And to be a big empire, to need that to be strong in the use of military power. So I think that is one of the origins of our crash of attitudes concerning how to manage the rights, the fundamental rights. The second question, you asked me about if I expect that kind of reaction. Well, in fact, not as we have seen. Because we believe, I believe, and we generally believe, after 40 years of democracy, to be part of the European Union, to use the European rule of law, and to protect, rhetorically, the human rights, there is a new political generation in Spain who, despite its opposition to an independent Catalonia, which is perfectly democratic, despite that, they will accept to solve a problem through the dialogue. And we were wrong, because there has no one single problem to use violence in front of international media. No one single problem. Like when CNN, Al Jazeera are broadcasting when I must go to vote, they start to hit the people. And we, of course, in that sense, we didn't expect that kind of reaction. We expect a reaction as till the 1st of October, from the 1st of October till 10th of October, I received in a kind of, not exactly back channel, but in our relationship with the Spanish government. They say, okay, I understand, the 1st of October, change the things, we must talk, it's possible to allow a window of dialogue. You has won, but you were not enough, etc., etc., etc. We start that. That was a joke, because they has 1 week after our first declaration of independence, they had the start of a huge repression, and the Jordis were put in jail.
Are we going to give this man an applause?